thing about lawyers is confidentiality is a burden that we carry.
It's a burden. I love
It's
it.
a burden that we
It's a
carry,
burden, yeah.
but it's also what we sell.
Yeah.
So you must have heard me say in response to some of the things that Dre said, I'm able to say we advised on this. Rules are rules, right? And part of what happens with governance and law and lawyering and those sorts of things is sometimes you push the limits, sometimes you get to the limit of the rules. Some people, so there's a how should I say, a spectrum. And then you sort of, operate
find your way where you can be in the middle.
So on this one, timing potentially could have been different, but the thinking is not flawed.
So I know. Are there? I mean, we've seen a lot of reports. There was one that made the rounds from our guy Sam Sude. That RenCap report.
Yeah.
Were there any banks that maybe give you concern?
See. Speaking
The ones that give you concern. I mean,
no. You can just quote the.
I mean, like upsides, downsides. I don't make some good money this week though. I mean,
listen.
It was all positive.
Yes,
positive.
I mean,
globally that is.
I mean, listen, man. I mean, even when the markets opened on Monday, everyone expected a panic. It was because the letter, like I said, it generalized banks, right? So whether a bank was good or was going to be okay or not going to be okay, you knew that the prices, you knew there was going to be a panic in the markets because of the way the first circular was written.
Yeah.
Are there any banks that we're worried about? Yeah, I mean, everyone was worried about a couple of the tier 2 ones, maybe one or two tier 1s. But I think at the end of the day, some of these guys have come out with statements saying that everything is going to be okay. We think everything will be okay. I'm not worried.
No, that was not the question. The question was
I'm not worried.
the analysis that was done in that report.
How accurate was the analysis? It was quite accurate, right? Was it accurate?
No, it said certain things.
Why are you guys afraid of naming banks? I don't understand.
What report?
It said certain things.
There was a RenCap report.
Yeah, it said certain things.
Yeah.
It said, for instance, it said things like, let's just assume that all these loans go bad.
All the loans go bad.
No, this part, yes, because there is a possibility.
All the loans go bad? No, the loans go bad.
Guys,
I mean, what's
the
your
report is
NPL
flashing on the
spike
screen already. I don't understand. So what?
Your NPL spiked a
they
little
didn't
bit. So one or two loans
They didn't
go
name
bad.
some banks.
Yes.
They named Zenith.
Access.
They named Access. They
First
named First Bank. They named FCMB. And these banks they came out to also clarify
Yeah.
Positions.
Yeah,
Some of them have said,
First Bank hasn't come out.
well, as at the time we taped this,
Yeah.
First Bank wasn't out yet, but they've come out to say, look, no issues.
Yeah.
We're aware of the forbearance. We're working on it.
Yeah.
We're going to clear it. Is that perhaps why we saw a resurgence of their share price?
Yeah, especially on the Zenith side, right? I think that everyone, Zenith is a strong bank generally, or Zenith is perceived as a strong bank. First, G2Co came, I think we all knew G2Co was clean to a degree. Zenith is a strong bank. So regardless, even for me, my expectation was regardless, Zenith is just going to clean it up. Or at least reduce or provide for it. Provide for it. And you know that Zenith is able to provide for it. So a bank like Zenith, you're confident that whatever comes out, they'll be fine. So so that's why it came up.
Yeah, but you see,
I know we could just try to make it to say, I've said enough.
So this is the conversation. This is the conversation. This is the conversation. Yeah, this is the conversation, right? This is the conversation. It's basically the fact that, like I said earlier, the story needs to be changed. You need to come out and say, okay, this is our position. And which some of them have done, even though the maths is not mathing in some of their statements, right? This is it's come, all this math is not, but
because there's no new numbers said in those statements, right?
So, but you are coming in front of the story now, you're now putting in front of people and explaining to people that, okay, this is what our exposure is, and this is what we're doing to clean that side of the market up. So, if you still believe in the story of the bank, you will still invest in it, regardless, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything the CBN...
Zenith has even come out to say it's like 22% of gross loans, so maybe 10%.
The CBN's mandate isn't to keep banks alive.
The
CBN's mandate is to ensure that the banking industry is healthy.
Fair enough.
That's different from what you just said. To keep banks alive and to
The
No, he's
banking
saying it's not.
industry
it is not okay.
It's not its job to keep banks alive.
100%. No, it's not.
But it's not whose job.
It's
Exactly.
the CBN's job.
That's completely wrong.
No, it's not.
No, no, no,
It's not.
I-
It's
I-
not.
I-
Bank
it's-
is- how
It's
does it
financial
work?
stability.
Financial stability. Yeah,
not
financial
banks alive.
stability is
Not keep banks alive. If the
Oh,
bank
okay,
needs
okay,
to
banks
die,
can fail, yeah,
if the
yeah,
banks
yeah.
needs to fail,
Yeah.
then it should fail.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think so. I mean,
But I mean,
I don't really
when you
agree, though.
when you step above that theory,
Yeah.
you find that there are times when the
Exactly.
failure of the bank,
yeah, it generally
It's
pulls the
not the
economy
option.
down. Exactly.
and so to keep the market stable, you have to
bank has to
save.
be
No,
alive.
so
save
but
certain
in
banks.
that case,
No, no, I hear- I hear
in
your
that
point.
case,
Too big to
there
fail.
maybe that the bank failing would affect financial stability in the banking industry.
Yeah, systemic
but if it is
situations.
not a
No, no, you're right.
if it's not going to affect the industry as a whole,
Then it die.
If a
then
bank,
let
if
the
a bank
die.
like Zenith or First Bank fails, it will affect everybody now.
Baba.
Those banks,
Let's not
that's
start
the
putting
backbone
words
of
in-
it.
Anyway, I don't think there's any.
Backbone.
I don't think there's any. There's no. I don't think there's any bank failing though.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we're seeing, but what I do envisage at some point, I don't know, Chiki, whether, I mean, you see this as well. Potential mergers down the line, acquisitions, deals happening.
As a result of this.
Yeah, and do you think like perhaps maybe this sector is probably ripe for another banking deal?
I mean, I have to be honest. I don't know enough about this to authoritatively say it will lead to mergers, right? And I think I sort of agree with Arnold that some of these banks are so big and, if you like, so able that they wouldn't be shaken that badly by this. But maybe the smaller banks, and some of the smaller banks have been named in the past as potential M&A targets. So whether this is the impetus, I can't really say. But we've heard suggestions in the past about your mid-tier, tier 2, and down the ladder banks being potentially acquisition targets.
Especially if the
So
bank has
do you
a
think
clean
anything like
out
that,
book.
Sonny?
Has a
Do you anticipate anything like that?
yeah, no, I
Would you want to see
expect-
deals like that?
I actually expect. I want to see.
Like which one?
That's
Yeah, I'm doing your job for you.
so,
Like which one?
can we remember one very unusual merger in Nigeria between was it Sterling UBA and what was the
Standard
name?
Bank?
Was it Standard Bank?
Standard Trust.
Standard Trust.
yeah.
That it was an unusual merger at the time because we didn't even know what it was. Was it an acquisition? Was it who was acquiring who? But it was just weird for many reasons. One had a huge name. One had fantastic.
Fun fact, I worked on that acquisition actually.
Oh, hello.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it.
And wait, by the way, more fun facts. So let me give you, because I did my own research before I came here, and so let me give you some of the deals that he's worked on, and let's see if he's going to give us, some
tea.
some tea on some of those deals, because I
That
do
deal
know that
particularly, I remember it was a head
He-
scratcher. That
he
deal,
was
I
into
kept for
a lot of his deals.
months. We're like, who's acquiring who? Because it seemed like this party was the one laying the ground rules, but this party looked bigger.
I mean, I think
yeah. So
Go on, yeah, go.
So no, so some of your more recent deals, that because it's good that we're segueing into deals now that you've done more recently, and it'd be nice to just get your insight. I mean, I know lawyers don't like to say too much, but it'd be nice to just get your insight.
That deal is one I would like to see more of. Yeah.
Tolaram acquiring Guinness.
Oh, you were there?
yeah.
Is that you? That's
I'm able to say that I advised Tolerable on that acquisition.
Okay. One of the biggest deals this side of the
Exxon
century, right?
Exxon
For
sale of MPN Mobile.
So-
is it MNP or MPNU? MPNU.
MPNU.
So I'm able to say that I advised ExxonMobil on the sale to Seplat.
Mercuria on financing Owando's acquisition of NAOC. I mean,
Oh, come
you
on.
can check these things online. Just go to their website. Yeah,
Oh, Dre.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, we
And
advised.
the one that I also knew very well. This is a bit of an old one. That was the one I had to call him. Say, give me low down. And he was like, will you get off my phone? I didn't realize that I'm a lawyer. And that was Diamond Bank's merger with Access.
So I advised Diamond Bank on the merger with Access.
Okay, guys.
Wow. Okay.
Eat him up.
Okay.
Which one?
So
Which one's the favorite?
So the two that stand out to the three, so there's the UBA one, there's the Diamond Bank, and there's the Seplat one.
And a lot of the MTN deals, by the way, the very old MTN. I don't know how you, because I remember one of the first times I went to Chike's house, some of the plaques that I saw were MTN, those early MTN deals. Like,
Love it.
So for me, the Tolaram Guinness deal, right? One of the reasons I love it is because I paid close attention to it. And the reason I paid close attention to it because it was sort of working around my thesis, and one of the reasons I moved back. Right, it was we are seeing all these Nigeria being Nigeria, we're going through this hard time, devaluation, depreciation, interest rates are crazy, policy makers can't figure themselves out. So we're seeing this huge exits of the Western businesses, right? So Diageo with Guinness, Holcim with Lafarge. GSK exited, Unilever, will they, won't they? That's another conversation for another day. And everyone is up in arms, like what's going on? And I've always been like, listen, let me move back to Nigeria. Let's all come back. Let's all just put our capital together.
Let's come back.
And let's buy these things, right? Which kind of what happened in Russia in the 90s, right? When the West was exiting, you had all these Russian guys come together.
Come back and then basically just creating oligarchs.
But unfortunately, we're not doing that. We're seeing the East come, Tolaram, right, which they've been around anyway, but we've seen the East come, we've seen Huaxim come and pick up Lafarge. But I like that deal, not that I like it, but it just sort of piqued my interest because I feel like, and I know there are more deals like this happening where the Western guys are leaving. So it'd just be good to get your view on this, on how we can come and play. And I'm not saying stop the East from coming or Southeast Asian from coming, but like I said, it's one of the reasons I'm here. It's a lot of these deals, even on a smaller scale, they're happening, right? Guinness is just big because Guinness is listed, but it's just be good to get your view on this, on just how we can actually look for deals like this and see things like this and take advantage of it, rather than coming as a. I mean, I came in as a stock market investor to say, you know what, it's an M&A play. So normally, when there's an M&A play, you sell the one buying and you buy the one getting bought. So we try to do that, right? Where it's like, okay, that these guys are they're still selling for cheap, but it's more expensive than it's listed.
Absolutely.
Right? So you take advantage of that. Same thing happened in Lafarge. But it would just be good to hear your thoughts on this and what happened, how it worked out, and then we can figure out how we can come in.
I mean, I think a few caveats, right?
Yeah.
And
you
that's,
can't say too much.
and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
The problem, I was sitting in a meeting once with someone who'd been very senior in Nigerian government many years ago, but he's not a massive business person. And then we're talking, this was a couple of years ago, and we're talking just generally, it was, call it halftime, we're talking. And then he starts to speak about some of the things that you hear Nigerians talk about generally, right? And then he stops. And then at some point he says, look, I know too much. And then he stopped.
Okay.
The thing about lawyers is confidentiality is a burden that we carry.
It's a burden. I love
It's
it.
a burden that we
It's a
carry,
burden,
but it's also what we sell.
Yeah.
So you must have heard me say in response to some of the things that Dre said, I'm able to say we advised on this, that, and we've been fortunate, and I've also been fortunate in my career. I've really worked on quite a number of significant
Deals.
transactions in Nigeria, right? And first of its kind, etc., etc. So the problem is there's very little that you can talk about. There are things you can talk about. One thing, myth to bust, right? We always assume that just because one entity is bigger, that creates a confusion as to who's acquiring who, right?
Boom.
And in truth, it doesn't really necessarily matter. If you think about it, the Seplat MPN transaction, which we worked on advising ExxonMobil, I mean, the MPN target that was acquired by Seplat was way bigger than Seplat. So it makes no difference whether one is smaller than the other. That doesn't decide who's acquiring who. And that's the same goes for the UBA Standard Trust, where I advised UBA many years ago. But to your question about, the exit of Western multinationals from Nigeria. If you think about it, Diageo has not necessarily left the Nigerian market. I think what Diageo did is rethink their involvement.
Okay.
And so they've sold their equity stake in Guinness, right? But they've sort of retained interest in Nigeria in terms of they still sell into this Nigerian market. They still own the brands, right? So essentially, the new owners have bought this company and they're going to be bottling and selling the brands, right?
Okay.
But the brands remain owned by
Diageo.
Diageo. So it's a rethinking of their strategy in the Nigerian market and saying maybe it makes better sense for us as Diageo to approach this market this way. And there's certain products that they still have direct control of into Nigeria. So that's how that's
Okay.
Now, if I think about Tolaram may look to you like a Singaporean company, right? And it is. But that business has been in Nigeria and in Africa for 50 years, no less, right? So it will be foolish of us to think of them as
New entry.
as Asians.
Yeah,
If you like, right? So they're locals.
Yeah.
And quite a number of those people that you see there are people who are second generation, sometimes even third generation, who have been born, or if not born here, raised here.
Okay.
So they know this market and they're able to work some of those assets and their investments better than your Western multinationals
so
would.
they can
And
navigate better.
that for me, to the extent I can speak about it, is the logic behind how in the short time they've been in the saddle at Guinness, they've been able to make the gains that they've made that